The cinematic hook. They say an alpha never begs. That power bows to no one, breaks for nothing. But here stands Kyle Draven, the most feared king in 5 territories, staring at an empty bed and a letter that's burning a hole through his chest. His mate is gone. His child, unborn and unknown until this moment, is gone with her. And for the first time in his ruthless life, the Alpha King realizes he's lost the only battle that ever mattered. Stick around till the end, because this story doesn't go where you think it does. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know who's riding with us on this one. The first thing Kyle noticed when he walked into their chambers was the silence. Not the comfortable kind. Not the silence of sleep or meditation or even anger. This was the silence of absence, heavy and final, like the air after a funeral when all the mourners have gone home and you're left alone with what you didn't say. He stood in the doorway, still wearing his council robes, still carrying the weight of a 12-hour session where old wolves argued about tax reforms and border disputes like any of it actually mattered. His jaw ached from clenching it. His temples throbbed from listening to Elder Garrett drone on about maintaining traditions while the southern packs grew restless. Lyra's scent lingered in the room, but it was fading, going stale. That wasn't right. She should be here. She was always here when he returned, curled up in the reading chair by the window or asleep in their bed with a book fallen open on her chest. Kael moved into the room, his boots silent on the thick carpet. The bed was made. Military corners, not a wrinkle in sight. Lyra never made the bed like that. She'd pull the covers up haphazardly, leaving lumps and valleys, and he'd always smoothed it out after her with a mixture of irritation and something softer he refused to name. His chest tightened. On the pillow, his pillow, lay a single folded piece of paper. He stared at it for longer than he should have, some primal part of his wolf brain screaming danger, screaming run, screaming that once he picked up that paper, everything would change. But alphas don't run. Alphas don't hesitate. He crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched it up. The handwriting was Lyra's. Neat, controlled, each letter precisely formed. She'd always had good penmanship, the result of a childhood spent in a minor pack where education actually mattered, not like the warriors he'd grown up with, whose letters looked like claw marks. Kyle, I'm leaving. Not because I'm angry, though I have every right to be. Not because I hate you, though some days I've come close. I'm leaving because I'm tired of being invisible in my own life. You chose your throne over me every single day for 3 years. You chose council meetings and political alliances and the approval of wolves who'll be dust in 50 years while I sat in this room and waited for you to choose me just once. I know what you'll say, that you were building something, that you were securing our future, that everything you did was for the kingdom, for the pack, for legacy. But Kyle, I was never asking you to abandon your crown. I was asking you to see me while wearing it. Last night, I found out I'm carrying your child. I sat on the bathroom floor at 3 in the morning staring at the test, and my first thought wasn't joy or fear. It was, how long will it take him to notice? So I'm making it easy for you. You won't have to choose anymore between your throne and your family, because your family is leaving. Raise your kingdom. Build your legacy. Just do it without me. Don't look for me. I mean that. You'll only find someone who stopped believing you could love anything more than power. Lyra Kyle read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. His hands started shaking. Not a tremor, not the slight shake of fatigue or age, but a violent trembling that spread from his fingers to his wrists to his entire body. The paper crumpled in his grip. Pregnant. She'd been pregnant and he hadn't known, hadn't noticed, hadn't paid enough attention to the woman he'd bound himself to in front of the moon goddess, and every pack in the kingdom to see that she was carrying his child. How long will it take him to notice? The words were a knife between his ribs, precise and fatal. He spun toward the door, letter still clenched in his fist. Lyra. He threw the door open and nearly collided with Marcus, his beta, who'd clearly been standing guard outside. Marcus took one look at Kyle's face and went rigid. Where is she? The beta's expression asked without words. Gone? Kyle's face answered. How long? Don't know. Marcus's jaw tightened. The bond between alpha and beta meant they rarely needed full sentences. The beta could read Kyle's emotional state like a book, and right now that book was screaming panic in a language Kyle had never learned to speak. When did you last see her? Kyle managed to grind out. Yesterday afternoon. She was in the library. Seemed fine, quiet, but Lyra's always quiet. And you didn't think that was strange. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, and they both knew it. Marcus held his ground. With all due respect, Alpha, I'm not her keeper. That's supposed to be your job. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Kyle could have ripped Marcus's throat out for the insubordination. Should have, by traditional law. An Alpha doesn't tolerate that kind of challenge, especially not in front of anyone who might be listening. But Marcus was right, and they both knew that too. How long ago did she leave? Kyle asked, forcing his voice level. Marcus pulled out his phone, pulled up security footage with the efficiency of a wolf who'd clearly already been checking. The timestamp says her car left the south gate at 4:47 a.m., 7 hours ago. 7 hours. She had 7 hours on him. In 7 hours, she could be anywhere. The Northern Territories were vast, wild, filled with places even his best trackers couldn't follow. Did she take anything? Kyle asked. One bag. Clothes, some books, her mother's jewelry box, left everything you ever gave her. That hurt worse than it should have. He'd given her plenty over the years. Not thoughtful things, not romantic things, but expensive things. Jewels and dresses and a custom car she never drove. All of it still here. All of it meaningless. Get everyone up, Kale said. I want trackers on her scent. I want every gate guard questioned. I want to know which direction she went, which road she took, where she might be headed. Marcus hesitated. Alpha, if she doesn't want to be found... I don't care what she wants, Kale snarled, and his wolf surged forward in his voice, making the words echo with power. She's my mate. She's carrying my heir. I want her found. Now. The command rippled outward, binding and absolute. Marcus's head bowed automatically, his wolf submitting even as the man's eyes stayed hard. Yes, Alpha. Marcus turned and strode down the hallway, already barking orders into his phone. Within minutes, the entire palace would be awake. Trackers would be mobilized. Guards would be questioned. The most efficient manhunt in Crimson Moon history would begin. And yet Kyle stood there in the doorway, still holding the crumpled letter, and felt more powerless than he'd ever felt in his life. Tasek. 6 hours later, Kyle stood in the war room surrounded by maps and reports, and a dozen wolves who all looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Nothing, the head tracker said, and the word landed like a death sentence. Her scent ends at the south gate. After that, nothing. She either masted or got into a vehicle with someone we can't identify. How does a scent just end? Kale asked quietly. Too quietly. The kind of quiet that came before violence. The tracker, a grizzled wolf named Silas, who'd been hunting for 40 years, met his eyes without flinching. Wolfsbane oil. Rub it on your skin, and you're a ghost to us. She planned this, Alpha. This wasn't impulsive. Kale's claws extended involuntarily, cutting into his palms. Blood dripped onto the mahogany table. She's one woman, he said. Pregnant. Alone. You're telling me 12 of the best trackers in the kingdom can't find one pregnant woman? We're telling you she doesn't want to be found, Silas said bluntly, and she's smart enough to make sure she isn't. There's a difference between tracking prey and tracking someone who knows how tracking works. Then try harder. Alpha, Silas said, and his voice gentled slightly, the way you'd talk to someone in grief, which only made Kyle's rage spike higher. The Northern Territories are 400,000 square miles of wilderness. No packs, no laws, no infrastructure. If she went north, and every sign says she did, she's in Wind Territory now. Rogue country. The kind of place where wolves go to disappear. Or die, Marcus added quietly. Everyone turned to look at the beta. Marcus met Kyle's eyes steadily. You need to hear it, Alpha. A pregnant wolf alone in rogue territory has maybe a week before someone finds her. And when they do, they're not going to care that she's a queen or that the child is yours. They're going to see an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Kale asked, though he knew. Of course he knew. The kind where they hold her for ransom, Marcus said, or kill her and claim the child as their own to legitimize their bloodline. Or worse. No one asked what worse meant. They all knew. Kyle's wolf howled inside his chest, a sound of pure rage and terror that wanted to claw its way out and tear through everything between him and his mate. He forced it down with every ounce of control he'd spent a lifetime building. Then we go north, he said. I'll lead the search myself. Silence crashed through the room. Finally, Elder Garrett spoke from the corner where he'd been lurking like a spider. The king cannot abandon his throne to chase after a wayward mate. The kingdom needs you here. Kale turned slowly to face the old wolf. Garrett was ancient, one of the original counselors who'd served Kael's father and grandfather before him. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes sharp and calculating. "My mate is missing," Kael said with deadly precision. "My child is in danger. The kingdom can wait." "Can it?" Garrett's voice dripped false concern. "The southern packs are restless. The eastern borders report rogue activity. The trade agreements with the Silver Fang pack expire in 2 weeks. You leave now and you'll return to chaos. Then you handle it," Kael snapped. "That's what I pay you for." "We are advisors, Alpha, not rulers. The council cannot make decisions in your absence. Tradition." "Screw tradition," Kael roared, and his power exploded outward, rattling the windows and driving every wolf in the room to their knees. "My mate is out there. My son is out there. And you're talking to me about trade agreements?" Elder Garrett stayed kneeling, but his eyes glittered with something cold and knowing. "Forgive me, Alpha, but perhaps if you'd paid such attention to your mate while she was here, she wouldn't be out there now." The room went dead silent. Kael could have killed him, should have killed him. His claws were already out, his wolf already surging forward, ready to paint the walls with the old bastard's blood. But the words hit home because they were true. Everyone saw it on his face. The moment the Alpha King realized he had no defense, no justification, no argument that would hold water. He'd neglected his mate. He'd chosen wrong. And now she was gone. "Get out," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All of you. Out." They fled. Even Marcus hesitated only a second before following the others, leaving Kael alone with maps that meant nothing and a crumpled letter he'd been carrying in his pocket like a talisman. He smoothed it out on the table, read it again. "I was asking you to see me while wearing it." When had he stopped seeing her? When had the woman who'd challenged him at their first meeting, who'd stood in front of his throne and called him out for his arrogance, who'd kissed him in the rain after their binding ceremony like he was the only thing that mattered in the world, when had she become invisible? He tried to remember the last time they'd had a real conversation. Not the perfunctory "how was your day" exchanges while he dressed for another meeting, but an actual conversation where he'd asked her opinion and listened to the answer. Weeks ago? Months? He tried to remember the last time he'd touched her with intention, not just the absent-minded kiss on the forehead before bed or the automatic hand on her back at public events, but really touched her, held her, made her feel like she mattered. The memories wouldn't come. 3 years of marriage, and what did he have to show for it? A cold bed, a letter full of justified accusations, and a mate who'd rather risk rogue territory than spend another day at his side. His phone buzzed. "Marcus. Alpha. We found something." "What?" "Security footage from a gas station 40 miles south. Lyra stopped there around 6 a.m., paid cash, bought supplies. She wasn't alone." Kael's blood went cold. Who was with her? "Don't know yet. Male, mid-30s, no pack scent we recognize. They seem familiar." He put his hand on her back when they walked to the car. "Find out who he is," Kael growled. "I want a name, a pack, a history. I want to know everything. Already on it. But Alpha, there's something else." "What?" "She's not hiding. She stopped at a gas station in broad daylight, used her real credit card before switching to cash, smiled at the camera. She wanted us to see her. Why would she want that?" "Because she's sending a message," Marcus said quietly. "She's showing you she's fine, that she's safe, that she chose this. Or she's telling me to stop looking," Kael said. "Maybe. Or maybe she's testing whether you will." Kael didn't sleep that night. He stood in front of the windows in his office, watching the moon arc across the sky, and tried to figure out when everything had gone so wrong. He'd been raised to be Alpha. His father had drilled it into him from childhood. The pack comes first, always. Your wants, your needs, your happiness. None of it matters compared to the survival of the whole. So when Kael took the throne at 23 after his father's death, he'd done exactly what he'd been taught. He dedicated himself completely to the kingdom. Every decision, every sacrifice, every moment of every day had been in service to making Crimson Moon the strongest pack in the territories. And it had worked. Under his rule, they'd expanded their borders, secured crucial alliances, crushed 3 challenges from rival packs, and built an economy that made them the envy of every Alpha from here to the coast. He'd done everything right. So why did it feel like he'd lost everything that mattered? The door opened behind him. He didn't turn. You look like hell, Marcus said. Haven't slept. Neither have I. Got updates. Kale finally turned. His beta looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, his usually neat hair disheveled. The male in the footage is named Derek Thorne, Marcus said, pulling up something on his tablet. Age 36, former warrior from the Frost Peak, pack up north. Left his pack 5 years ago, became a freelance tracker and guide. Specializes in helping wolves navigate the Northern Territories. No criminal record, no political affiliations, generally respected in the communities he works with. He's helping her disappear. Looks that way. An alpha. He's good at it. If she hired him, she's serious about staying gone. How did she even find him? Kale asked. She's never left the kingdom. Marcus hesitated. Actually, she has. Found records of 3 trips to the northern settlements over the past 6 months. Short trips, 2 or 3 days each. Said she was visiting historical sites for a research project. What research project? The one she told you about 4 months ago at dinner. The one you said sounded interesting and then never asked about again. The words were another knife, surgical and precise. Kale closed his eyes. He'd done that. He remembered now, vaguely. Lyra had been excited about something, talking rapidly about old pack structures and migration patterns. And he'd nodded along while reading reports on his tablet. She was planning this for months, he said quietly. While I was sitting across from her at dinner, she was planning her escape. Can you blame her? Kale's eyes snapped open. What did you just say? Marcus held his ground. I said, can you blame her? Because I can't. I've watched you for 3 years, Alpha. Watched you build an empire while your mate sat alone in that palace. Watched her smile fade a little more every month. Watched her stop trying to get your attention because she knew she wouldn't get it. You're out of line. Someone needs to be. Marcus's voice hardened. You want the truth? Here it is. Lyra's leaving is the best thing that could have happened to you, because it's the only thing that could have made you realize what you had. I know what I had, Kale snarled. Do you? Because from where I stand, you knew what you owned. There's a difference. The accusation hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Kale wanted to rage, to deny it, to throw Marcus out for his insubordination. But the words stuck in his throat because they were true. He'd treated Lyra like a possession. A beautiful, valuable possession that he kept safe and provided for and displayed at formal events, but a possession nonetheless. When was the last time you asked her what she wanted? Marcus pressed. Not what she needed, not what would make her comfortable, but what she actually wanted out of life. Kale said nothing. When was the last time you asked her about her day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you surprised her with something that mattered to her instead of something expensive? When was the last time you made her feel like she was more than just the woman who warmed your bed and looked good on your arm? Stop, Kale said quietly. No, Marcus said. You don't get to stop. You made me beta because I'm the only one with the balls to tell you the truth. So here's the truth. You failed her. Not as an alpha, not as a king, but as a mate. And now she's gone, and you're standing here trying to figure out how to fix it with trackers and searches and commands, when the only thing that would have kept her here was something you haven't given her in 3 years. What? Kale asked, his voice raw. Yourself, Marcus said simply. She didn't want your money or your title or your protection. She wanted you. The man, not the crown. And you were so busy being the Alpha King that you forgot how to be her husband. The words landed like physical blows. Kale turned back to the window, his reflection staring back at him. He looked old, tired. Nothing like the powerful Alpha King the kingdom saw. How do I fix this? He asked quietly. You start by understanding. It might be too late, Marcus said, and his voice gentled. She didn't leave because she was mad, Kyle. She left because she was done. There's no anger in that letter, just exhaustion. And that's so much worse. What if I find her? Then you'd better have more to offer than an apology, because sorry doesn't unwrite 3 years of neglect. You're going to have to prove you've changed, and that's going to take time she might not be willing to give you. The baby is leverage you don't get to use, Marcus cut in sharply. You don't get to guilt her into coming back because of the child. If you find her, if she listens to you, it has to be because she wants to, not because she feels obligated. Then what do I do? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You do what you should have done 3 years ago. You put her first. Not the kingdom, not the pack, not tradition or duty or legacy. Her. And you hope to the goddess that it's enough. 48 hours after Lyra disappeared, Kael received the first threat. It came in a plain envelope delivered to the palace gates by a runner who vanished before guards could question him. No return address, no signature, just a single page written in crude block letters. We have your female. The heir she carries is worth more than gold. Deliver 500,000 in unmarked bills to the Dead Oak at Raven's Crossing by midnight tomorrow, or we start sending pieces. Kael read it 3 times, his hands completely steady, his face carved from stone. Marcus stood beside him, equally still. It's a bluff, the beta said finally. We'd have heard whispers if rogues actually grabbed her. The Northern Territories talk. Maybe, Kael said, or maybe they grabbed her before word could spread. Either way, we can't ignore it. No, we can't. Kael pulled out his phone, made 3 calls. Within an hour, a team of his best warriors was assembled in the war room, armed and ready to move. The Dead Oak at Raven's Crossing was 200 miles north, deep in rogue territory. If this was real, if they actually had Lyra, it would be a trap. Rogues didn't just ask for money and walk away. They'd take the payment and kill the hostage anyway, or demand more, or use the meeting to ambush whoever showed up. But if there was even a chance, I'm going, Kael said. Like hell you are, Marcus replied immediately. You send a team. You don't walk into a trap personally. If they have her, I need to be there. If they have her, they'll kill you both and claim the throne through your child. Use your head, Kael. I am using my head, Kael said coldly, and my head says my mate needs me. So I'm going. Then I'm going with you. No, you stay here. If this goes wrong, the kingdom needs its alpha alive, Marcus interrupted. I'm going. That's not a request. They stared at each other, 2 wolves who'd fought side by side for over a decade, who knew each other's every tell and weakness. Finally, Kael nodded. Fine. You, me, and 6 warriors. We leave in an hour. And if it's a trap? Then we spring it, Kael said grimly. And we make sure whoever said it regrets it. Mkok. Raven's Crossing was exactly as miserable as Kael remembered. He'd been there once before, years ago, tracking a rogue pack that had been raiding settlements. The place was all mud and desperation, a cluster of ramshackle buildings around a crossroads where 3 territories met and no laws applied. The Dead Oak stood at the northern edge, a massive tree that had been struck by lightning decades ago and somehow survived, its blackened branches reaching toward the sky like claws. Kael and his team arrived 30 minutes before midnight. They spread out in the surrounding woods, invisible and silent, while Kael and Marcus approached the tree alone. The money was in a duffel bag slung over Marcus's shoulder, $500,000 in cash withdrawn from the kingdom's emergency reserves. Kael had considered bringing counterfeits, but if this was real, if they actually had Lyra, he wasn't going to risk her life over money. They waited. Midnight came and went. 15 minutes later, figures emerged from the darkness. 5 of them, all male, all radiating the barely controlled violence of rogues who'd been surviving outside pack law for too long. Their leader was huge, easily 6'5", with scars crisscrossing his face and arms that looked like tree trunks. You the Alpha? He asked, his voice like gravel. I am, Kael said. Where's my mate? The rogue grinned, showing broken teeth. First things first. You bring the money? Marcus held up the duffel bag. Toss it here. You show me my mate first. The rogue's grin widened. That's not how this works, Your Majesty. You don't make demands. We do. Then we walk, Kael said flatly, and turned to go. Wait. Kael stopped, didn't turn around. Fine, the rogue growled. Show him. One of the other rogues pulled out a phone, played a video. It was dark, grainy, but Kael could make out a figure tied to a chair in what looked like a basement. Female. Long hair. Pregnant belly visible under her shirt. His wolf roared. Is she hurt? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. Not yet. But she will be if you don't hand over that bag. Marcus tossed the duffel. It landed at the rogue's feet. The leader opened it, rifled through the cash, nodded in satisfaction. Pleasure doing business. Where is she? Kael demanded. The rogue looked up and his grin turned predatory. Oh, didn't I mention? That wasn't your mate in the video. That was some pregnant bitch we grabbed from a settlement yesterday. You're female? We don't have her. But thanks for the donation to the Rogue Retirement Fund. The forest exploded into violence. Kael's warriors dropped from the trees like avenging angels. The rogues tried to fight back, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Within 90 seconds, all 5 were on the ground, bleeding and broken. Kael stood over the leader, his boot on the wolf's throat, his claws extended. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Do you know anything about my mate? Or was this all just a scam?" The rogue spat blood. "Just a scam. Heard you were looking for her. Figured we'd cash in. Don't know where she is, don't care." Kael pressed down harder. The rogue choked, his eyes bulging. "Alpha," Marcus said quietly. "He's telling the truth." Kael knew he was. He could hear the man's heartbeat, smell his fear. This was just an opportunistic bastard who'd seen a chance to make easy money off a desperate king. He lifted his boot. "Take them to the cells," he told his warriors. "They can rot there until I decide what to do with them." As the warriors dragged the rogues away, Kael stood in the darkness, breathing hard, trying to control the rage and fear warring in his chest. "This is what it's going to be," Marcus said quietly. "Every rogue with a grudge or a debt is going to come after her now that word's out she's missing. She's the biggest target in 5 territories." "Then we find her first," Kael said. "And when we do? What then?" Kael looked at his beta, and for the first time since this nightmare started, he let the mask slip. Let Marcus see the fear underneath. "Then I pray she gives me a chance to fix what I broke," he said. "Because if she doesn't..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. If Lyra didn't give him a second chance, if she looked him in the eye and told him she was done, that he'd used up all his chances and she'd rather raise their child alone in the wilderness than come back to him, he didn't know what he'd do. Didn't know if there was any point to the crown, the kingdom, the power he'd sacrificed everything to maintain, if the only thing that mattered was gone. For the first time in his life, Alpha King Kael Draven understood what it meant to be powerless. And it was destroying him. The rain started 3 days after the failed ransom trap, and it didn't stop. Kael stood in his office watching water stream down the windows, distorting the kingdom beyond into something unrecognizable. Fitting. Everything felt distorted now. Wrong. Like he'd been living in a house with a cracked foundation for years, and only noticed when the whole structure started collapsing. The door opened without a knock. Only one wolf in the kingdom had that privilege. "We got a hit," Marcus said. Kael turned so fast his coffee sloshed over the rim of his mug. "Where?" "Settlement called Broken Ridge, about 300 miles northeast. One of our informants saw a pregnant female matching Lyra's description 2 days ago. She was buying supplies. Alone. Not with Derek Thorne, the guide she'd hired. That bothered Kael more than it should have. If she'd parted ways with her escort, that meant she was either confident enough to navigate rogue territory solo or desperate enough that she didn't have a choice. Neither option was good. "How reliable is this informant?" Kael asked. "Reliable enough. He's a merchant who does trade runs between territories. Saw her at a general store. Said she looked tired but healthy. Paid cash, didn't talk much, left heading west toward the mountain passes." The mountain passes. Jesus. That was hardcore wilderness, the kind of terrain that killed experienced trackers. And Lyra was pregnant, alone, heading straight into it. His wolf clawed at his insides, howling to chase, to hunt, to find his mate, and drag her back to safety whether she wanted it or not. The instinct was so strong it made his bones ache. But that's exactly what would drive her further away. "Get a team ready," Kael said. "Small. 4 wolves, max. We leave in an hour." "You're going yourself again," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, the council won't like it." "The council can go to hell," Kael said flatly. "I've given them 3 years of my life. They can survive a few days without me." "A few days." Marcus's tone was carefully neutral. "You think you'll find her that fast? I think if I don't find her soon, someone else will. And I won't like what they do when they find her." The words hung heavy between them. Kael set down his coffee, moved to the weapons cabinet, started pulling out gear. A tactical vest. Knives. A handgun loaded with silver rounds, illegal as hell, but necessary in rogue country, where pack law didn't mean shit. "You know what's going to happen if you find her," Marcus said quietly. "What?" "She's going to tell you to leave. And you're going to have to decide whether you respect that, or whether you force her to come back." "I won't force her," Kael said. "Won't you?" The question stopped Kael cold. He looked at his beta, at the wolf who'd known him since they were teenagers sparring in the training grounds, who'd seen him at his best and worst, who knew exactly what kind of male lived under the Alpha King mask. I want to say I won't, Kyle admitted. I want to believe I'm better than that. But the truth is, I don't know what I'll do when I see her, when I see my child, when I'm standing in front of the only thing that matters and she tells me to walk away. Then figure it out now, Marcus said, before you're face to face with her, because if you make the wrong choice, if you let your wolf override your humanity, you won't just lose her. You'll prove every fear she had about you was justified. Pops. They found Broken Ridge at sunset on the 4th day. It wasn't much. 24 buildings clustered around a central square, surrounded by forest so thick it looked black. The kind of place where wolves came to disappear, to hide from packs and laws and the consequences of whatever they'd done to end up here. Kyle and his team came in quietly, dressed in civilian clothes, no pack markers, just travelers passing through. Drawing attention here was a good way to end up dead in a ditch. The general store was easy to find, only one in town. The owner was a grizzled old wolf with one eye and hands scarred from hard labor. He looked up when they entered, took one look at Kyle, and his remaining eye narrowed. "You're Alpha," he said. Not a question. Kyle could have lied, should have lied, but something in the old wolf's gaze said he'd see through it anyway. "I am," Kyle said, "but I'm not here on pack business." The owner snorted. "Alpha's always on pack business. That's the job. Not today. Today I'm just a male looking for his mate." That got the old wolf's attention. He studied Kyle for a long moment, then jerked his chin toward the back room. "Come on, your boys stay here." Marcus started to protest, but Kyle waved him off. "It's fine." The back room was cramped and smelled like tobacco and old leather. The owner gestured to a chair, poured 2 glasses of something amber and potent, pushed one across the table. "Drink," he said. "You look like you need it." Kyle did. The liquor burned going down, harsh and unrefined, nothing like the expensive whiskey in his office cabinet. It tasted real. "I heard you're looking for a pregnant female," the owner said. "Pretty thing, dark hair, green eyes. Came through here 3 days ago. That's her. Do you know where she went?" The owner took a slow drink, watching Kyle over the rim of his glass. "Depends. You planning to hurt her?" "No." The owner's eye bored into him. Funny thing about alphas. They always think they're not hurting anyone. Power's just power, right? Dominance is natural. But I've seen enough females run from their alphas to know that the worst wounds don't leave scars you can see. Kale's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to hurt her. I'm here to make sure she's safe." "Safe from what? From rogues? Or from you?" The words were a slap. "Both," Kyle said quietly. "If I'm being honest." That seemed to satisfy something in the old wolf. He nodded slowly. "She bought enough supplies for a week. Camping gear, dried food, a map of the mountain passes. I told her those passes are suicide this time of year. Snow's already starting at the higher elevations, and she's in no condition to be climbing." "What did she say?" "She said she'd been in worse situations. Then she paid and left." Kale closed his eyes. Stubborn. God, she was so stubborn. It's what had drawn him to her in the first place, that core of steel that refused to bend. And now it might get her killed. Did she say where she was going? No. "But I've been running this store for 40 years. I know where wolves go when they want to disappear. There's a settlement about 60 miles west, up in the high country. A place called Haven's End. It's where females go when they're running from something. No males allowed past the gates without permission from the council. They take her in." Kale's wolf bristled at the idea of his mate in a settlement that explicitly excluded males, but he shoved the instinct down. If Lyra was safe, that's all that mattered. "How do I get there?" The owner pulled out a battered map, marked a route with a pencil. "Follow this trail west. It's rough going, especially the last 20 miles. You'll need to leave your vehicles and hike. And when you get there, don't expect a warm welcome. They've seen enough of what alphas do to their mates. They won't trust you." "I don't care if they trust me. I just need to see her." The owner studied him again, then nodded. "One more thing. Girl like that running from an alpha king hiding a pregnancy. She's not just scared, she's done. Whatever you did to make her leave, it was bad enough that she'd rather risk dying in the mountains than stay with you. You show up at Haven's End making demands, they'll kill you and bury you where no one will ever find the body." "Noted," Kyle said. The old wolf raised his glass. "Good luck, Alpha. You're going to need it." Upalkit. The trail to Haven's End was exactly as brutal as advertised. They left the vehicles behind and hiked on foot, carrying minimal gear, moving fast. The temperature dropped 10 degrees with every 1,000 feet of elevation. By the second day, there was snow on the ground and ice forming on the tree branches. Kale barely felt it. His wolf was too close to the surface, driving him forward with single-minded determination. Lyra was close. He could feel it in his bones, in the way his heart rate kicked up every time the wind shifted, like maybe it would carry her scent. Marcus kept pace beside him, silent and watchful. The other two wolves they'd brought, veterans named Torres and Simmons, followed without complaint. On the third day, they hit the checkpoint. It was subtle, just a break in the trees, a clearing that looked natural but wasn't. Kyle caught the scent of wolves watching from the shadows, heard the nearly silent click of safeties being released. He stopped, raised his hands. "We're not here for trouble," he called out. "I'm looking for someone." A figure stepped out of the trees. Female, mid-40s, built like a fighter with scars on her arms and a rifle in her hands. Behind her, 3 more females materialized, all armed, all watching with the kind of wariness that came from experience. "You're Alpha," the leader said. "I can smell it from here." "I am. My name is Kyle Draven. I'm looking for my mate." "Your mate," the female repeated, and something cold slid into her voice. "Let me guess." "She ran. You followed. Now you want to drag her back." "No," Kale said. "I want to make sure she's safe." "Safe from what?" "From rogues, from wolves who'd use her to get to me, from the dangers of traveling alone while pregnant, but not safe from you." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Kale lowered his hand slowly. "I know what you think of me. What you think of alphas in general, and maybe you're right. Maybe I am the danger she needs protecting from. But she's carrying my child, and she's alone in territory that will kill her if she makes one wrong move. So you can shoot me if you want, but I'm not leaving until I know she's okay." The female studied him for a long moment. Then she lowered her rifle. "Your mate's not here," she said. Kale's stomach dropped. "What? She came through 3 days ago. We offered her sanctuary. She turned us down. Why?" The female's expression shifted into something almost sympathetic. "Because she said if she stayed in one place, you'd find her eventually, and she wasn't ready to face you." "Where did she go?" "Further west, into the deep country. There's nothing out there but wilderness and old ruins. It's where wolves go when they want to make sure they're never found." "She can't survive out there alone," Kyle said, and he heard the desperation creeping into his voice. "She's pregnant. The weather's turning. She doesn't have the skills." "She has a guide," the female interrupted. "Male named Derek Thorne. You know him?" Kale's hands clenched into fists. "Yes, I know him. He's good, one of the best. If anyone can keep her alive out there, it's him." That should have made Kyle feel better. It didn't, because Derek Thorne was keeping Lyra alive, keeping her safe, being everything Kale should have been. And the jealousy that ripped through him at that thought was so visceral it made him nauseous. His wolf wanted to hunt the male down, rip him apart for daring to put his hands on what belonged to the alpha. The instinct was overwhelming, primal, the kind of possessive rage that could make him do something he'd regret. "And that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" the rational part of his brain whispered. "You still think of her as something that belongs to you, not a person with her own choices, just a possession you've lost track of." "Can you tell me which direction they went?" Kyle asked, forcing his voice level. The female hesitated. Then she pulled out a map, marked a location. "Last we heard, they were heading toward the old temple ruins about 80 miles northwest. But that was days ago. They could be anywhere by now. Why would they go to temple ruins?" "Because there's a network of caves underneath, dry, defensible, easy to hide in. Also because there's a hot spring that flows through the lower levels. Good place for a pregnant female to rest." Kyle committed the location to memory. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," the female said. "The path to those ruins goes through Talon Ridge territory. You know what that means?" Kale did. Talon Ridge was controlled by a rogue pack led by a wolf named Victor Steele, a vicious bastard who'd been exiled from 3 different territories for crimes ranging from murder to trafficking. If Victor found out an alpha's pregnant mate was traveling through his territory, "We'll handle it," Kyle said. The female's expression said she doubted that. "One more thing, Alpha. Your mate? She asked us to give you a message if you came looking." "What message?" The female's eyes softened slightly. "She said to tell you that she forgives you, but forgiveness doesn't mean she's coming back." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Kale stood there in the snow, surrounded by armed females who'd gladly kill him if he made one wrong move, and felt something inside him break open. Not the clean break of a bone snapping, the messy break of something that had been cracking for years finally giving way. "She forgives me," he repeated quietly. That's what she said. "But she doesn't love me anymore." The female didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was written all over her face. Kael nodded once, slowly. "Okay, thank you for the information." He turned to leave. "Alpha," the female called after him. He stopped, didn't turn around. "Whatever you're planning to do when you find her, make sure it's about what she needs, not what you want. Because if you show up and make this about you, about your pride or your throne or your wolf's instincts, you'll lose her for good, and you'll deserve it." "I know," Kael said, and he did. That was the hell of it. He knew exactly what he'd done wrong, knew exactly how he'd failed, knew exactly why she'd left. The knowledge didn't make it any easier to fix. Bosek. They made it to Talon Ridge territory 2 days later. The first sign they'd crossed the border was the bodies. 3 wolves, strung up from trees like grotesque decorations. They'd been dead for days, their bodies picked over by scavengers. A warning to anyone who thought about crossing Victor Steel without permission. "This is bad," Torres muttered. "We should turn back, find another route." "There is no other route," Marcus said, studying the map. "Not unless we want to add 3 weeks to the journey." "Then we go through fast and quiet," Kael said. "We don't engage unless we have to." "And if we have to," Simmons asked, "then we make it count." They moved carefully, staying off the main trails, using every trick they knew to mask their scent and presence. For 6 hours, it worked. Then Victor's wolves found them anyway. There were 8 of them, all battle-scarred and feral-looking, the kind of wolves who'd killed enough that it showed in their eyes. They materialized from the forest like ghosts, surrounding Kael's group before anyone could react. Their leader was a massive brute with a face like a sledgehammer and eyes that held no mercy. "Well, well," he drawled. "What do we have here? Trespassers?" "We're just passing through," Kael said calmly. "We don't want trouble." "Too bad. Trouble found you anyway." The brute took a step forward, so did his pack. The circle tightened. Kael's wolf surged forward, ready to fight, ready to kill, ready to do whatever it took to get to Lyra. But he forced it down. 4 against 8 were bad odds, and they couldn't afford to get bogged down in a fight. "What do you want?" Kael asked. The brute grinned. "Everything you got. Weapons, supplies, clothes. Hell, we might even take your boots if they fit." "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly. "Am I?" The brute's grin widened. "See? I don't think I am. I think you're just 4 wolves who wandered into the wrong territory. And in Victor's territory, there's a toll for passage." "Name it," Kael said. 5,000. Cash." "We don't have 5,000. "Then you got a problem." The wolves moved closer. Kael could see the calculation in their eyes, the way they were sizing up his group, looking for weaknesses. Torres had his hand on his knife. Simmons was shifting his weight, preparing to spring. This was about to get very ugly, and then a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That's enough." Everyone turned. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, male, mid-50s, wearing a long coat and an expression of utter boredom. But there was power radiating from him, the kind of power that made every wolf in the vicinity sit up and pay attention. Victor Steel. Had to be. The brute immediately stepped back, lowering his eyes in submission. "Boss, we were just harassing travelers," Victor finished. "I heard." He walked into the clearing, his gaze sweeping over Kael's group with casual interest. When his eyes landed on Kael, something shifted in his expression. "Alpha," he said. "Been a long time since we had an Alpha King passing through." "You know who I am," Kael said. "It wasn't a question. Everyone knows who you are, Draven. The question is, what the hell are you doing in my territory? Looking for someone. Aren't we all?" Victor pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. "Let me guess. Female. Pregnant. Traveling with a guide named Derek Thorne." Kael's entire body went rigid. "You've seen her." "Maybe." Victor exhaled smoke slowly. "Question is, why should I tell you anything? Because if you don't, I'll tear your territory apart looking for her anyway. And that's going to be messy for both of us." Victor laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "You got balls, I'll give you that. Coming into my territory, making threats. Most alphas have better survival instincts. I'm not most alphas. No. Victor's smile faded. No, you're not. You're the alpha who let his pregnant mate run away into rogue country. That takes a special kind of stupid. The insult should have made Kyle angry. Instead, it just made him tired. You're right, he said. I was stupid. I was arrogant. I thought I could have everything without sacrificing anything. And I was wrong. And now she's out here, in danger, because of me. So if you want to stand here and list all my failures, go ahead, but it won't change the fact that I need to find her. Victor studied him through the cigarette smoke. What'll you do when you find her? I don't know, Kael admitted. Probably beg. Probably grovel. Probably do whatever it takes to convince her I've changed. And if she says no, then I'll make sure she's safe and walk away. Victor's eyebrows rose. Just like that? Just like that. The rogue leader was silent for a long moment. Then he dropped his cigarette, ground it out under his boot. Your mate came through here 4 days ago, he said. Thorn had her holed up in a safe house while he negotiated passage. I gave them safe conduct through my territory in exchange for medical supplies. They were heading northwest toward the old temple ruins. That matches what we heard, Marcus said. Victor nodded. But here's the thing. About 6 hours after they left, another group came through asking about them. 5 wolves, heavily armed, professional. They had a photo of your mate. Said they were bounty hunters. Kael's blood went cold. Bounty hunters. Someone put a price on her head, Victor said flatly. 50,000 for the female, alive. Another 50 for the child once it's born. That's serious money. Enough that every rogue and mercenary in 5 territories is going to be hunting her. Who put out the bounty? Victor shrugged. Bounty came through encrypted channels. Could be anyone. Rival pack, political enemy, someone who wants leverage over you. Take your pick. Kael's mind raced. Someone wanted Lyra badly enough to put a $100,000 bounty on her and his unborn child. That level of money meant organization, resources, connections, not just some rogue pack looking to make a quick buck. Did you tell them where she went? Kael asked. Victor's expression hardened. I don't give up females to bounty hunters. Not my style. I told them she'd pass through heading east, sent them in the wrong direction. But they're not idiots. They'll figure it out eventually. How much of a head start did you give her? Maybe a day, maybe less if they're good. Kael turned to Marcus. We need to move. Now. Marcus nodded. Already on it. Victor held up a hand. One more thing, Alpha. Those temple ruins? They're not empty. There's a cult that's taken up residence there, calls themselves the Children of the New Moon. They're heavily armed, heavily paranoid, and they don't like outsiders. You go barging in there looking for your mate, they'll kill you first and ask questions never. Then I'll have to be persuasive, Kael said. Victor laughed again, shook his head. You know what? I like you. You're either brave or crazy, and I respect both. Tell you what, I'll give you 2 of my wolves as guides. They know the area, know how to approach the cult without getting shot. Consider it a professional courtesy. Why would you help me? Because your mate looked me in the eye and didn't flinch, Victor said. That takes guts. And because I've got daughters of my own, I know what it's like to want to keep them safe, even from themselves. He whistled sharply. 2 wolves emerged from the trees, both female, both carrying enough weapons to outfit a small army. This is Reese and Jax, Victor said. They'll get you to the ruins alive. After that, you're on your own. Kael nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Victor said. You might not like what you find when you get there. The temple ruins rose out of the forest like broken teeth. What had once been a grand structure was now little more than crumbling walls and collapsed towers, reclaimed by nature and time. But there were signs of recent habitation, smoke rising from what looked like the main hall, lights flickering in the windows, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Reese held up a hand, signaling the group to stop. They crouched in the underbrush, watching the compound. How many? Marcus whispered. At least 20, Jax replied. Maybe more inside. They rotate guards every 4 hours like clockwork. How do we get in? We don't, Reese said. Not without an invitation. But I know someone on the inside. Give me an hour. She disappeared into the forest without another word. Kyle settled in to wait, every nerve in his body screaming to move, to act, to find Lyra and make sure she was safe. But rushing in blind would get them all killed. So he waited, and while he waited, he thought about what he'd say when he finally saw her. "I'm sorry. That seemed inadequate. I was wrong. Also inadequate. I love you." Did he even have the right to say that anymore? Love wasn't just a feeling, it was actions, choices, daily decisions to put someone else first. And he'd failed that test over and over. What would she see when she looked at him? The male she'd fallen for? Or the cold alpha who'd ignored her for 3 years? Could people change? Really change? Not just promise to change in the heat of the moment, but actually rewire themselves at the fundamental level? He didn't know, but he was about to find out. Reese returned exactly 1 hour later with a hooded figure in tow. "This is Brother Matthias," she said. "He's agreed to escort you inside." The hooded figure pushed back his hood, revealing a weathered face with kind eyes. "Your maid is here," he said quietly. "She arrived yesterday. She's resting in the lower sanctuary." "Is she hurt?" Kael demanded. "Exhausted, malnourished, but alive. The child is strong. I need to see her. That's not my decision. Our Mother Superior will decide if you're granted access." "Then take me to her," Kael said. Brother Matthias studied him for a long moment. "You should know, Alpha, that your mate has requested sanctuary here. Under our laws, that means she's under our protection. If she doesn't want to see you, we won't force her." "I understand," Kael said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. They followed Brother Matthias through a hidden entrance in the temple wall, down a series of narrow corridors lit by torches, until they reached a large chamber where a woman sat on a throne-like chair. She was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "I am Mother Kala," she said, "and you are the Alpha who drove his mate into the wilderness." It wasn't a question, and Kael couldn't deny it. "I am," he said. "Why should I let you see her?" "Because she's my mate. My child." Mother Kala's laugh was bitter. "Your mate, your child. Everything is possession with alphas. Nothing is partnership." "You're right," Kael said, and the admission seemed to surprise her. "I treated her like a possession, like something I owned, and that's why she left. But I'm here now, and I'm asking, not commanding, asking for a chance to make it right. And if she refuses to see you, then I'll respect that. But I need to hear it from her, not from you, not from anyone else. I need to look her in the eye and hear her tell me she's done." Mother Kala was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well," she said. "I'll ask her. But the choice is hers." A younger woman was sent to fetch Lyra. The minutes that followed were the longest of Kael's life. Every second felt like an hour, every breath an effort. And then he heard footsteps, turned. And there she was. Lyra stood in the doorway, one hand on her swollen belly, her face pale and drawn. She'd lost weight everywhere except the pregnancy, her cheekbones sharp, dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy braid, and she was wearing clothes that were too big for her frame. She looked exhausted, beautiful, alive. And when her eyes met his, Kael saw absolutely nothing there. No anger, no love, no recognition, just emptiness. "Hello, Kael," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, emotionless, the voice of a stranger. "I was wondering when you'd find me." That emptiness in her eyes was worse than hatred. Kael had prepared himself for anger, for tears, for her to scream at him or throw things, or tell him exactly how much damage he'd caused. He could have handled rage. Rage meant she still felt something, even if that something wanted to hurt him back. But this hollow neutrality, this complete absence of emotion when she looked at him, this was death. The death of everything they'd been, everything they could have been. "Lyra," he said, and his voice came out rough, fractured. His wolf was howling inside his chest, trying to reach her, trying to connect with the mate bond that had once thrummed between them like a living thing. But there was nothing, just silence where music used to be. She didn't move from the doorway, didn't step closer, didn't step back, just stood there with one hand on her belly, the other hanging loose at her side, and looked at him like he was a stranger she'd once known a long time ago. Mother Kala cleared her throat. "I'll give you privacy. But Alpha, you'll remain in this chamber. My guards are outside. Any attempt to force your mate to leave with you will end badly for everyone involved." "Understood," Kael said, not taking his eyes off Lyra. The old woman left, taking her attendants with her. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the stone chamber. They were alone. Marcus had stayed outside with the others. This conversation, this reckoning, was between mates only. No witnesses, no buffers, Just 2 wolves and 3 years of damage laid bare. You look tired, Kael said, because he didn't know how else to start. I am tired, Lyra replied. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. I've been running for 2 weeks, sleeping in cars and safe houses and caves, trying to stay ahead of you and everyone else who wants to drag me back to a life I couldn't survive anymore. The words landed like body blows. I wasn't trying to drag you back, Kael said. I was trying to make sure you were safe. Safe, Lyra repeated, and something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, not quite, but something sharp. Safe from what, Kael? From rogues? From bounty hunters? Because you didn't seem concerned about my safety when I was sitting in our chambers every night waiting for you to come home. When I was eating dinner alone because you had another council meeting. When I was sleeping in an empty bed because you chose paperwork over your mate. I know, Kael said. I know I failed you. I know I was so focused on the kingdom that I forgot about the one person who should have mattered most. Should have mattered, Lyra echoed, past tense. That's honest, at least. She moved into the room, finally, her steps careful and measured. She looked heavier than just pregnancy weight, like exhaustion had settled into her bones and made a home there. She sat down on a stone bench, wincing slightly. Kael's instinct was to help her, to rush over and make sure she was comfortable, but something in her posture told him to stay where he was. Why are you here? Lyra asked. And don't say it's because you love me. Don't insult us both with that. The words were a knife between his ribs. I do love you, he said anyway. You love the idea of me, Lyra corrected. You love having a mate, having an heir on the way, having the perfect political partnership. But you don't love me. You don't even know me. That's not true. Lyra laughed, but there was no humor in it. Okay. Then tell me, what's my favorite book? Kael opened his mouth, closed it. His mind went blank. What's my favorite season? Lyra pressed. What am I afraid of? What makes me happy? What do I dream about? Silence. You can't answer, Lyra said softly, because you never asked. In 3 years of marriage, you never once asked me what I wanted out of life beyond being your mate and bearing your children. I thought you were happy, Kael said, and even as the words left his mouth, he knew how weak they sounded. You thought I was convenient, Lyra corrected. I was there when you needed me, quiet when you didn't, and grateful for the scraps of attention you threw my way. That's not happiness, that's survival. Kael felt something crumbling inside him, some foundation he'd built his entire life on revealing itself as sand. Everything he'd believed about their relationship, about what it meant to be an alpha and a mate and a king, was wrong. Fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. I want to fix this, he said. Tell me how to fix this. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then she shook her head. You can't, she said, because fixing it would require you to become someone you're not. It would require you to put me first, consistently, every day, above the kingdom and the pack and your own ambitions. And we both know that's not going to happen. You're an alpha king, Kael. That's what you are at your core. And alpha kings don't put their mates first. They put their thrones first. I can change, Kael said desperately. Can you? Lyra's voice was gentle now, almost pitying, because I've been watching you for 3 years, and the pattern never changes. Every time there's a choice between me and the kingdom, you choose the kingdom. Every time. And you always have a good reason. It's always urgent, always important, always just this one time, and then things will be different. This time is different. No, Lyra said. This time, you're scared. You're scared because I left, because I took away the comfortable arrangement you'd built, because there are bounty hunters and rogues and all these external threats that make you feel like you're losing control. But once those threats are gone, once I'm back in that palace, safe and contained, you'll go right back to who you were, because that's who you know how to be. The truth of it was devastating. Kael wanted to argue, to insist she was wrong, but the words wouldn't come, because she wasn't wrong. Every promise he'd ever made to prioritize her had crumbled under the weight of the next crisis, the next political challenge, the next opportunity to strengthen his kingdom. The pattern was clear, and patterns didn't break just because you wanted them to. I'm carrying your son, Lyra said, and her hand moved protectively over her belly. And I'll make sure he knows who his father is. I'll tell him about your strength and your intelligence and your dedication. But I won't come back. I can't. Because going back means watching myself disappear again, and I finally found myself out here in the wilderness. I won't give that up. What if I abdicate? Kale said suddenly. Lyra's eyes widened. What? I'll abdicate. I'll give up the throne. We'll go somewhere quiet, somewhere away from all of this, and I'll just be your mate. Not an alpha, not a king, just yours. Lyra stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You don't mean that, she said. I do. No, you don't. Because you've spent your entire life building that kingdom. It's not just what you do, it's who you are. You'd resent me within a year, hate me within 2, and I'd be right back where I started, invisible and resentful, except this time in some cabin in the woods instead of a palace. She was right. God help him, she was right again. Because even as he'd made the offer, part of him had been calculating the cost, weighing what he'd lose, already feeling the phantom ache of giving up everything he'd built. The throne wasn't just a job, it was his identity, his purpose, the lens through which he understood himself. Without it, who was he? Just a male who'd failed his mate so thoroughly she'd rather raise their child alone than give him another chance. The door burst open. Marcus stood there, his face grim. Alpha, we have a problem. Kale turned, some part of him almost grateful for the interruption. What kind of problem? The kind with guns and bad intentions. Marcus stepped into the room. There's a group outside the temple, 20, maybe 25 armed wolves. They're demanding Mother Calla hand over Lyra. The bounty hunters, Kale said. That's my guess. And they're not being subtle about it. They've already killed 2 of the temple guards. Lyra stood up, her hand still on her belly, her face pale. They can't get in here. Mother Calla said this place is defensible. It is, Marcus agreed. But they're not trying to force their way in. They're setting up a siege. They'll wait us out, cut off supplies, and eventually the temple will have to surrender. How long do we have? Kyle asked. Maybe a week. Maybe less if they cut the water supply. Kale's mind was already working through scenarios, calculating odds, mapping escape routes. This is what he was good at. Strategy, tactics, taking an impossible situation and finding a way through it. We need to get her out, he said. Tonight, before they finish setting up the perimeter. I'm not going anywhere with you, Lyra said flatly. Kale turned to face her. You don't have a choice. Those wolves out there are being paid $100,000 for you and our child. They'll wait as long as it takes, and when this temple runs out of food or water, Mother Calla will have to make a choice between protecting you and protecting her people. We both know which one she'll choose. She wouldn't, Lyra said, but her voice wavered. She would, Kale said bluntly. She should. 20 people shouldn't suffer because of one female and her problems. Then I'll turn myself in, Lyra said. I'll go to them. Make a deal. Absolutely not, Kale growled, and his alpha voice rolled through the chamber, making the stones vibrate. You're not going anywhere near those wolves. You don't get to give me orders anymore, Lyra snapped back, and her own power flared, Luna strength meeting alpha dominance. I'm not your possession. The air between them crackled with competing energies. Marcus cleared his throat. As entertaining as this is, we're wasting time. Alpha, you need to make a decision. We fight our way out, we negotiate, or we wait and hope for a miracle. We can't fight, Kale said, not with Lyra pregnant, and I don't trust anyone outside those walls to negotiate in good faith. Then what? Marcus asked. Then I give them what they want, Kale said slowly, an idea forming. Me. Both Lyra and Marcus spoke at the same time. No. Absolutely not. Kale ignored them. Think about it. They want leverage over the Alpha King. They want money. I can give them both. I'll turn myself over, make sure Lyra gets safe passage out of the territory, and then deal with whoever hired them from the inside. That's suicide, Marcus said flatly. Maybe, Kale agreed. But it gets Lyra and our son to safety. And then what? Lyra demanded. You die a hero and I raise our child alone, knowing you sacrificed yourself because I ran away? Better than both of us dying, Kyle said. No, Lyra said. She moved closer, and for the first time since he'd arrived, there was real emotion in her eyes. Anger, fear, something that looked almost like caring. You don't get to do this. You don't get to make up for 3 years of neglect by throwing yourself on a grenade. I'm not trying to make up for anything, Kyle said quietly. I'm trying to keep you alive. By getting yourself killed, Lyra shot back. That's not redemption. That's cowardice. The word hit like a slap. Before Kyle could respond, one of Mother Calla's guards rushed in. The mercenaries are demanding a parley. They want to speak with whoever's in charge. Tell them I'll speak with them, Kyle said. The guard hesitated, looking at Mother Kala, who'd appeared in the doorway. The old woman studied Kael for a moment, then nodded. Very well. But I'm coming with you. This is still my temple. They assembled outside the main gates 10 minutes later. Kael, Mother Kala, Marcus, and 4 of the temple guards. On the other side of the clearing, the mercenaries waited, a wall of armed wolves radiating barely contained violence. Their leader stepped forward. He was younger than Kael expected, maybe early 30s, with cold eyes and a professional demeanor that was somehow more threatening than obvious hostility. I'm Captain Drake, he said. I believe you know why we're here. I do, Kael replied. The bounty on my mate. Not just a bounty, Drake corrected. A contract. Someone wants her very badly, alive and unharmed. The child, too. Who hired you? Kael demanded. That's confidential. I'll pay you double to walk away. Drake smiled. It's not about the money, Alpha. It's about reputation. We take a contract, we fulfill it. Otherwise, we're out of business. Then we have a problem, Kael said. We don't have to. Drake's tone was almost reasonable. Hand over the female, and everyone else walks away. No one else has to die. Not happening. Drake sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. He pulled out a phone, tapped something, then held it up. The screen showed security footage, recent footage, of the Crimson Moon Palace, of Elder Garrett in his private office, talking to someone off screen. The volume was turned up loud enough for everyone to hear. The contract is simple, Garrett's voice crackled through the speaker. Retrieve the female and the child, keep them alive but isolated. The Alpha King will be so desperate to get them back, he'll agree to anything, including stepping down. The other voice, muffled but recognizable as one of the other council members, replied, And if he doesn't step down? Then we have his heir. We can raise the child ourselves, mold him into the kind of alpha we need, one who understands that the council's wisdom matters more than a king's pride. The recording cut off. Kael stood there, frozen, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. Elder Garrett. The wolf who'd served his father, who'd guided Kael through his first years as alpha, who'd been at every council meeting for 3 decades, had orchestrated all of this. The bounty, the threats, the siege, all of it designed not to hurt Lyra, but to use her as leverage to remove Kael from power. The old bastard hadn't been trying to protect the kingdom from Kael's distraction. He'd been trying to steal the throne. Drake pocketed the phone. So you see, we're just contractors. The real enemy is sitting in your palace, calling himself your advisor. Now, you can make this easy and hand over the female, or you can make it hard and watch a lot of good wolves die. Your choice. Kael's wolf was roaring for blood, demanding he tear Drake apart and then race back to the kingdom to rip Garrett's throat out. But the cold, calculating part of his brain that had kept him alive through a dozen political crises was already working through the implications. If he went back to confront Garrett, Lyra would be vulnerable here. The mercenaries would take her. If he stayed to protect Lyra, Garrett would consolidate power in the kingdom. By the time Kael made it back, there might not be a throne to return to, and if he tried to fight his way out with Lyra, she could get hurt. The baby could get hurt. There was no good option, just variations of losing. Marcus leaned in close. Alpha, we need to move. Now. Before Kael could respond, another voice cut through the tension. I'll go with you. Everyone turned. Lyra stood in the temple entrance, flanked by 2 guards, her chin up and her eyes hard. If this is about me, then I should have a say. I'll go with you, Captain Drake. Under one condition. Lyra, no, Kael started. She ignored him. You let everyone else leave. The temple, the guards, my mate. They all walk away safe, and I'll come with you peacefully. Drake considered this. And why would you do that? Because I'm tired of people dying because of me, Lyra said simply. Because I don't want this child growing up in a world where its mother's choices got innocent people killed. And because I know how this ends. You're not going to hurt me or the baby. Whoever hired you needs us alive. So I'll cooperate, and you'll get your money, and everyone else stays safe. The logic was sound. The sacrifice was noble. And Kael hated every word of it. No, he said, absolutely not. Lyra finally looked at him, and there was something broken in her eyes. This isn't your choice, Kael. For once in our relationship, this is my decision, and I'm making it. I won't let you do this, Kael said. You don't have the right to stop me, Lyra replied. You gave up that right when you ignored me for 3 years. So I'm going to do what I think is best. For our child. For these people. And maybe even for you. She started walking toward Drake. Kale moved to intercept her, but Marcus grabbed his arm. Don't, the beta said quietly. If you force her to stay, she'll hate you forever. And everything she said in that letter will be proven true. The words stopped Kyle cold, because Marcus was right. If he commanded her to stay, if he used his alpha authority to override her choice, he'd be proving that he still saw her as a possession, that he hadn't learned anything, that his love was just another form of control. But watching her walk toward those mercenaries, watching her put herself in danger to protect everyone else, watching her make the kind of sacrifice an alpha should make, but this time making it for him, it was destroying him. Lyra reached Drake. The mercenary looked almost impressed. You're either very brave or very stupid, he said. Probably both, Lyra replied. Do we have a deal? Drake nodded. We have a deal. He gestured to his wolves. Pack it up. We're leaving. Wait, Kale called out. Drake turned. I'm coming with you, Kale said. Lyra's eyes went wide. Kale, no. If you're taking my mate, you're taking me too, Kyle said. Non-negotiable. Drake's smile was predatory. Well, this just got interesting. 2 for the price of 1. I'm sure my employer will be thrilled. Marcus stepped forward. Alpha, this is insane. It's the only play we have. Kale cut him off. He pulled Marcus aside, lowered his voice. Listen to me. You're going to take Torres and Simmons and get back to the kingdom. Expose Garrett. Show that recording to the council. Take him down. And if he fights back? Then you fight harder, Kale said. You're beta. If I don't come back, the throne is yours. Use it. I can't lead the pack, Marcus said. You can. You're the only one I trust to do it right. Now go. That's an order. Marcus's jaw worked. Then he clasped Kale's arm. Don't die on me, you stubborn bastard. Do my best, Kale said. He turned back to Drake. Where are we going? You'll find out when we get there, Drake said. Now both of you, hands out. They were zip-tied and searched for weapons. Kale's knives were confiscated, his phone destroyed. Beside him, Lyra stood rigid and silent, her face pale but her spine straight. As they were led away from the temple, Kyle caught her eye. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? She asked. For all of it. For not seeing you, for not choosing you, for every single time I put something else first. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You know what's funny? I used to dream about you saying those words. Used to imagine exactly how it would feel to hear you apologize, to admit you were wrong. And now that you're saying it, I just feel empty. The words were a gut punch, because that emptiness meant she was done hoping, done waiting, done caring enough to be hurt by him anymore. They were loaded into the back of an armored transport. The doors slammed shut, cutting off the last of the daylight. In the darkness, Kyle could hear Lyra's breathing, quick and shallow, the sound of someone fighting panic. He shifted closer until their shoulders touched. She didn't pull away. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I won't let them hurt you, or our son. That's a promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Lyra replied. I've broken enough promises to you. I won't break this one. The transport started moving, bouncing over rough terrain, heading toward an unknown destination and an enemy who'd proven willing to betray everything for power. Kael's hands were bound, his weapons were gone, his kingdom was in chaos. His mate hated him, and for the first time in his life he was completely powerless. But somewhere in that powerlessness, something shifted. Some fundamental understanding that everything he'd built his identity on, power and control and dominance, had all been an illusion. True strength wasn't about commanding others, it was about sacrifice, about putting someone else first even when it cost you everything. Lyra had been trying to teach him that for 3 years. It had taken losing her completely for the lesson to finally sink in. In the darkness of the transport, with zip ties cutting into his wrists and his pregnant mate sitting beside him in terrified silence, Alpha King Kael Draven finally understood what it meant to love someone more than you loved yourself. The vehicle hit a bump. Lyra gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Are you okay? Kael asked immediately. I don't know, she said, and there was fear in her voice now. Real fear. Something's wrong. The baby... What? What's happening? Contractions, Lyra said through gritted teeth. I've been having them on and off for hours, but they weren't regular. Now they are. How far apart? 5 minutes, maybe less. Kael's blood went cold. She was going into labor. Here, now. in the back of a transport driven by mercenaries who were taking them to an enemy who'd already proven he'd sacrifice anyone for power. His son was going to be born a prisoner, and there was absolutely nothing Kael could do to stop it. The contractions were coming faster now. Kael could hear it in Lyra's breathing, in the way she'd gone silent except for these sharp, involuntary gasps every few minutes. The darkness of the transport made it worse, made every sound magnified, every shift of her body against his, a reminder that his mate was going into labor, while bound and captured, and he couldn't do a damn thing about it. "We need to stop," Kael called out to the front of the transport. His voice was level, controlled, the voice of an alpha giving commands. But underneath, his wolf was clawing at his insides, demanding he tear through the metal walls and rip apart anyone standing between him and his mate's safety. No response from the driver. "She's in labor," Kael tried again, louder this time. "You need to stop the vehicle. Now." Still nothing. Lyra's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers ice cold and trembling. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't give them leverage. They'll use it." "They already have leverage," Kael said. "They have us." Another contraction hit. Lyra's grip tightened on his hand, her nails digging into his palm hard enough to draw blood. She bit back a scream, reduced it to a low moan that made every protective instinct in Kael's body howl for violence. When it passed, she was panting. "That was 3 minutes," she said. "They're getting closer." "How close?" "Close enough that this baby's coming, whether we're ready or not." The transport hit a pothole. Lyra gasped, curling forward as much as her bound hands would allow. Kael shifted, trying to position himself so she could lean against him, trying to offer some kind of support, even though he was as helpless as she was. This was what powerlessness really meant. Not political setbacks or failed negotiations or enemies he couldn't immediately defeat. This, listening to his mate suffer while their child fought to be born into a world that was already trying to kill them both, and not being able to do anything except sit in the darkness and promise her it would be okay, even though they both knew it was a lie. There was a philosophy buried in that realization, something about how a king could command armies and control territories but still be brought to his knees by the one thing that mattered most. Power was an illusion. Control was a fantasy. The only real strength was the kind that showed up when you had nothing left but the choice to keep fighting or give up. Kael had spent 3 years building an empire. Now he was going to find out if he had the strength to protect the only part of that empire that actually mattered. The transport slowed. Stopped. The back doors swung open, flooding the space with harsh artificial light. Kael blinked against the brightness, his eyes adjusting to reveal Drake standing there with 4 armed wolves behind him. "Out!" the mercenary captain ordered. "She's in labor," Kael said flatly. "She needs medical attention, and she'll get it. After we deliver you to the client, now move." They were hauled out of the transport roughly. Kael's zip ties were cut just long enough to let him climb down, then immediately replaced with steel cuffs. Beside him, Lyra moved slowly, one hand on her belly, her face pale and slick with sweat. They were in some kind of compound. High walls, guard towers, the whole setup screaming military precision. In the center stood a mansion that looked more like a fortress, all stone and steel and windows that probably cost more than most wolves made in a year. And standing on the front steps, flanked by a dozen guards, was Elder Garrett. The old wolf looked exactly the same as he had at every council meeting Kael had ever attended. Neat suit, silver hair combed back, that expression of patient condescension that made it clear he thought everyone around him was slightly stupid. "Alpha King Kael," Garrett said, his voice dripping false warmth. "How good of you to join us. And you brought your lovely mate. How convenient." Kael's wolf surged forward, demanding blood, demanding he shift right here and tear the traitor's throat out. But he forced it down, forced himself to think tactically. He needed to understand the situation before he acted. "You orchestrated all of this," Kael said. "The bounty. The siege. All to get leverage over me." "Not just leverage," Garrett corrected. "Replacement. You've become a liability, Kael. Too emotional, too distracted. The kingdom needs an alpha who understands that duty comes before personal attachments. So you decided to kidnap my pregnant mate and force me off the throne. Kidnap is such an ugly word. I prefer strategic acquisition." "Call it whatever you want," Kael growled. "It's still treason." Garrett smiled. "Treason implies I'm betraying my king. But you stopped being my king the moment you let personal weakness compromise your judgment. A true alpha would never have let his mate run away in the first place. And he certainly wouldn't have abandoned his kingdom to chase after her like some lovesick pup. The words were designed to cut, to make Kyle doubt himself. And 3 weeks ago, they might have worked. 3 weeks ago, Kyle had believed all the same things Garrett was saying. That emotion was weakness, that personal attachments compromised leadership, that a true alpha sacrificed everything, including his own happiness, for the good of the pack. But standing here in this compound with his pregnant mate beside him and a traitor in front of him, Kyle understood something fundamental that Garrett never would. Strength wasn't about suppressing your humanity. It was about protecting what you loved, even when the cost was everything you'd built. "You're wrong," Kyle said quietly. "About all of it. A true alpha doesn't sacrifice his family for power. He uses his power to protect his family. And the fact that you can't see the difference is why you'll never be anything more than a bitter old wolf living in someone else's shadow." Garrett's smile vanished. His face went hard and cold. "Bold words from a wolf in chains," he said. "Let's see how bold you are when I'm raising your son to be the alpha you failed to become." Lyra made a sound, half gasp, half fury. "You're not touching my child." "Oh, my dear," Garrett said, turning that cold smile on her. "That's precisely what I'm going to do. You see, the kingdom doesn't need Kyle. It needs his bloodline, his heir, a child I can mold from birth to understand true duty. You'll be well cared for, of course. Comfortable chambers, the best doctors, everything you could want, as long as you cooperate." Another contraction hit. Lyra doubled over, biting back a scream. Kyle lunged toward her, but guards grabbed him, holding him back while his mate suffered. "Let me help her," Kale snarled. "She doesn't need your help," Garrett said. "She needs proper medical care, which she'll receive as soon as we have certain assurances from you." "What assurances?" "Public abdication. Recorded and witnessed. You step down from the throne, name me as regent until your son comes of age, and acknowledge that you're unfit to lead. Do that, and she gets the doctor she needs. Refuse, and we'll see how long she can endure labor without assistance. The threat was clear: cooperate or watch your mate and child die." It was the kind of leverage that would have worked on the old Kyle, the one who believed power mattered more than people. That Kyle would have calculated the odds, weighed the costs, and probably taken the deal because at least it kept them alive. But that Kyle was dead. Killed by 3 years of neglect and a letter written in neat handwriting and the sight of his mate walking into mercenary custody to protect people she barely knew. The new Kyle, the one born in the darkness of a transport while his mate went into labor, understood something the old one never had. Some things were worth more than survival. "No," Kyle said. Garrett's eyebrows rose. "No? You heard me. I won't abdicate. I won't legitimize your coup. And I sure as hell won't let you anywhere near my son." "Then she dies," Garrett said simply. "And the child dies with her. And you'll have no one to blame but your own stubborn pride." Lyra was breathing hard now, her contractions coming so close together she could barely catch her breath between them. Her water had broken at some point, soaking through her pants, and her face had gone from pale to gray. She was running out of time, and Kyle was making a choice that might kill them both. But he'd learned something in these past 2 weeks of chasing his mate through rogue territory and watching her sacrifice herself for strangers, and finally understanding what it meant to love someone more than you loved yourself. You couldn't build something real on a foundation of fear and coercion. You couldn't create strength by threatening the weak. And you couldn't call yourself an alpha if you traded your integrity for survival. True power wasn't about making others submit. It was about standing firm when everything in you wanted to break. Kyle looked at Lyra. Her eyes met his, and he saw understanding there. She knew what he was doing, knew what it might cost, and there was something like respect in her gaze, maybe even the ghost of the love that used to live there. "Do it," she said quietly. "What?" Garrett demanded. She was talking to Kyle, not the old wolf. "Do what you need to do. I trust you." Those 3 words landed like a detonation in Kyle's chest. "I trust you." After everything he'd done, all the ways he'd failed her, all the times he'd chosen wrong, she was giving him this. Not forgiveness, maybe, but faith. The belief that he could be better than he'd been. He wouldn't waste it. Kyle looked at Garrett, then he looked at Drake, who'd been standing quietly to the side watching this whole exchange with professional detachment. "How much is he paying you?" Kyle asked the mercenary captain. Drake's eyes narrowed. "That's confidential. I'll triple it. Right now. Funds transferred from my personal accounts before we leave this compound." "You don't have access to your accounts," Garrett interjected smoothly. "No," Kale agreed. But my beta does, and I'm betting he's already back at the kingdom, already exposing your treason to the council, which means your window for this coup is closing fast. Another few hours and you won't have the political support to make any of this stick. Garrett's face went carefully blank, which told Kyle everything he needed to know. The old wolf hadn't expected Marcus to move that fast. Drake, Kyle continued, still looking at the mercenary captain. You're a professional. You take contracts, you fulfill them, you get paid. But you also have a reputation to protect. What happens to that reputation when word gets out you helped overthrow an alpha king through treason and coercion? How many future clients are going to trust a mercenary who picks sides in internal pack politics? Drake said nothing, but something shifted in his expression. I'm offering you a clean exit, Kael said. Triple your fee, a signed statement that you were operating under false pretenses, and safe passage out of my territory. All you have to do is walk away. He can't pay you, Garrett said, but there was an edge of desperation in his voice now. His accounts are frozen. His authority is suspended. He's nothing. Except I'm not, Kael said. Because I'm still breathing, and as long as I'm breathing, I'm still alpha. And when my beta finishes exposing your conspiracy to the council, when the other packs hear that you tried to steal a throne through kidnapping and extortion, you'll be the one with nothing, exiled if you're lucky, executed if you're not. The silence that followed was heavy with calculation. Drake pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quietly. When he hung up, his expression was neutral. Your beta just held a press conference, he said. Broadcast to every pack in 5 territories. He played the recording of Elder Garrett arranging the kidnapping. Then he called for an emergency council session to vote on charges of high treason. Garrett's face went white. The vote passed, Drake continued. Unanimous. There's a warrant for your arrest, Elder, and a bounty on your head that makes what you were paying us look like pocket change. The old wolf seemed to age 10 years in an instant. His shoulders sagged. His carefully maintained composure cracked. No, he whispered. This isn't how it was supposed to go. It never is, Kyle said. That's the problem with building something on betrayal. Eventually, the foundation collapses. Drake holstered his phone. Transfer the funds, Alpha. We'll consider the contract null and void. Done, Kale said. Marcus, if you're listening, authorization code Crimson 77 Delta. Transfer 300,000 to Drake's account. Now. Somewhere, he knew Marcus would move the money. His beta wouldn't question the order, wouldn't hesitate, because that's what loyalty looked like. Not blind obedience, but trust that went both ways. Drake's phone pinged. He checked it, nodded. We're square, he gestured to his wolves. Cut them loose. We're done here. Wait, Garrett said desperately. You can't just leave. We had a contract. Had, Drake agreed. Past tense. Now we have a new contract with an alpha who actually honors his word. You should try it sometime. The cuffs came off. Kael's hands were free for the first time in hours. He moved immediately to Lyra, catching her as another contraction hit. She leaned into him, her weight against his chest, and he could feel how hard she was shaking. Hospital, he said to Drake. Closest one. Now. 10 minutes south, Drake said. We'll escort you. Do it. Garrett tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Drake's wolves tackled him, driving him face first into the gravel. When they hauled him up, the old wolf was bleeding from a split lip, all his dignity stripped away. You ruined everything, Garrett spat at Kael. The kingdom will fall without proper leadership. No, Kael said. The kingdom will thrive, because I'm going to build it on something stronger than fear and tradition. I'm going to build it on the belief that an alpha's first duty is to the wolves who trust him, not to power, not to legacy, to the actual living, breathing souls who look to him for protection. That's weakness, Garrett hissed. That's evolution, Kael corrected, and you're too old to understand the difference. They loaded Garrett into a separate transport, hands bound, guards on all sides. The last Kyle saw of him, the old wolf was staring out the back window with hollow eyes, watching everything he'd built crumble to dust. There was a lesson there about what happened when you confused control with strength, when you convinced yourself that suppressing emotion made you powerful instead of just making you cold. Garrett had spent decades believing that an alpha who cared too much was an alpha who'd fail. He'd died never understanding that an alpha who cared too little had already failed. Kael carried Lyra to Drake's personal vehicle. She was barely conscious now, her body exhausted from hours of labor without medical intervention. Her skin was clammy, her pulse too fast. and when she looked at him, her eyes were glassy with pain. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Just a little longer. We're almost there." "Cale," she whispered. "Yeah? If I don't make it." "You're going to make it," he cut her off. "But if I don't, promise me you'll tell our son about the woman I was trying to become. Not the one who sat in that palace and faded. The one who ran into the wilderness and found herself." "I promise," Kyle said, "but you're going to tell him yourself, because you're going to be fine. Both of you." She tried to smile. "Always so sure of yourself." "Not anymore," Kyle said honestly. "Now I'm just sure of you." The hospital appeared like a miracle. All white walls and bright lights and medical staff who took one look at Lyra and moved with urgent efficiency. They pulled her onto a gurney, wheeled her toward labor and delivery, and tried to stop Kyle from following. He followed anyway. "Sir, you can't be in here," a nurse said. "I'm her mate," Kyle said. "I'm not leaving." The nurse looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Kyle's eyes made her reconsider. "Fine, but stay out of the way." The delivery room was controlled chaos. Monitors beeping, nurses calling out numbers, a doctor in scrubs checking Lyra's vitals and speaking in calm professional tones that didn't quite hide the urgency underneath. "She's fully dilated," the doctor said. "Baby's in distress. Heart rate's dropping. We need to get this child out now." Lyra was barely conscious, her head lolling to the side. Cale moved to her side, took her hand, squeezed it hard enough that she opened her eyes. "Hey," he said, "I need you to focus. Can you do that for me?" "Tired," she mumbled. "I know, but our son needs you to be strong just a little bit longer, and then you can rest. I promise." "Can't." "Yes, you can. You're the strongest wolf I've ever met. You survived 3 years with me, you survived rogue territory, you survived a kidnapping while in labor. You can survive this." Something flickered in her eyes. Not strength, not quite, but stubborn refusal to quit even when everything in her wanted to give up. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The next 20 minutes were the longest of Kyle's life. He watched Lyra push with everything she had left, watched the monitors spike and fall, watched the medical team work with practiced precision to bring their child into the world. He held her hand and whispered encouragement and tried not to think about all the ways this could still go wrong. And then there was crying. Not Lyra's crying, their son's. The doctor lifted a small, squirming, furious bundle and held him up. "It's a boy. Healthy lungs, good color, strong heartbeat." Cale stared at his son and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe. This tiny creature, covered in blood and vernix and screaming his rage at being forced into existence, was his. Part of him, part of Lyra, a whole new person who'd never existed before this moment. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. Every decision Kyle made from this point forward would shape this child's life. Every failure, every success, every choice would ripple outward and affect this small wolf who couldn't even open his eyes yet but was already completely dependent on him. It was terrifying. It was perfect. They cleaned the baby, wrapped him in blankets, and handed him to Lyra. She cradled him against her chest with the last of her strength, tears streaming down her face. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi, baby. I'm your mom." The baby stopped crying, as if recognizing her voice. Kyle moved closer, looked down at them both. "Can I?" he asked. Lyra hesitated, then she nodded. He took his son into his arms for the first time. This impossibly small weight that somehow felt heavier than any crown he'd ever worn. The baby's eyes were closed, his tiny hand curled into a fist, his whole body radiating warmth and life and potential. "What do we name him?" Lyra asked quietly. Cale had been thinking about that for days. Every traditional alpha name felt wrong. Every family name felt like baggage. He wanted something that meant strength, but also hope. Something that acknowledged where they'd been, but pointed toward where they were going. "Asher," he said. "It means fortunate, blessed. Because despite everything, despite all my failures and all the ways this could have gone wrong, we're here. All 3 of us. And that's more than I deserve." Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, small and tired, but real. "Asher," she repeated. "I like it." The doctor cleared her throat. "I need to examine your mate, Alpha. She's lost a lot of blood. We need to make sure there's no internal damage." Cale nodded, reluctantly handed Asher to a nurse who promised to keep him close. He stepped back, let the medical team work, and for the first time in hours allowed himself to breathe. They'd made it. Lyra was alive. Asher was healthy. Garrett was in custody. The kingdom was secure. Against impossible odds, they'd actually survived. But survival wasn't the same as victory, because Lyra was still looking at him like he was someone she used to know, and Asher was still a stranger in his arms, and there was an entire kingdom waiting for him to return and prove he was the alpha they needed. The hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 hours later, Lyra was stable and resting. Asher was asleep in a bassinet beside her bed. Kyle sat in a chair by the window, watching them both, and trying to figure out what came next. Marcus called, "Alpha!" The beta's voice was rough with exhaustion. "The council's in chaos. Half of them are calling for emergency elections. The other half want you to execute Garrett publicly as a warning. And there's a delegation from the Silver Fang Pack demanding to know why their trade agreements are in limbo. Tell them I'll be back tomorrow," Kale said. Marcus was quiet. "Are you sure that's wise? You just became a father. Your mate nearly died. Maybe you should take some time." "The kingdom needs me," Kale said, "and I'm done running from responsibility. I made that mistake once. I won't make it again." "And Lyra?" Kale looked at his mate, at the way her chest rose and fell with each breath, at the dark circles under her eyes and the IV in her arm. "Lyra makes her own choices," he said quietly. "That's the whole point." He ended the call. Outside, dawn was breaking over the mountains. A new day, a new beginning, all those cliches that felt true despite their overuse. Kyle stood, moved to the bedside, looked down at his son. Asher had Lyra's nose and Kyle's strong jaw. His tiny fingers flexed in his sleep, reaching for something only he could sense. In a few years, he'd shift for the first time. In a few more, he'd start training. Eventually, he'd stand before the pack and accept the responsibilities of being an alpha's son. But right now, he was just a baby. Innocent and vulnerable and completely dependent on the two wolves who'd brought him into this broken, beautiful, violent world. "I promise," Kyle whispered, so quietly even his wolf hearing could barely catch it. "I promise I'll be better for you than I was for her. I'll show up. I'll pay attention. I'll choose you every single day." The baby slept on, oblivious. Behind him, Lyra stirred. "Kyle," she said, her voice hoarse. He turned. "I'm here." She struggled to sit up. He helped her, adjusting the pillows, making sure she was comfortable. When she was settled, she looked at him with those green eyes that had once looked at him with love, and now looked at him with something more complicated. Something that included hurt and respect and exhaustion. And maybe the faintest possibility of forgiveness if he earned it over years instead of expecting it in weeks. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I go back to the kingdom," Kyle said. "I deal with Garrett. I stabilize the council. I prove to everyone that I can be the alpha they need without sacrificing the mate I love. And what if you can't? What if it's impossible to be both? Then I figure out how to make it possible," Kyle said. "Because giving up isn't an option anymore. Not when I have this." He gestured to Asher, to her, to the family they'd created despite everything working against them. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "I'm not coming back with you," she said finally. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I need time. I need to know that this change in you is real and not just a reaction to crisis. Because you were a different person in that compound, Kyle. You were the male I thought I'd married, but I've seen you be that male before, in moments of stress, and then watched you go right back to being the cold alpha king once the crisis passed." Her words were fair. Brutal, but fair. "I understand," Kale said. "Take all the time you need. I'll send guards to protect you and Asher. I'll make sure you have everything you need, and I'll prove to you every single day that I've changed. Not with words, with actions. And if I decide I don't want to come back, if I decide to raise Asher on my own," the question was a knife in his chest, but Kyle didn't flinch from it. "Then I'll respect that," he said. "I'll be the best co-parent I can be. I'll show up for every milestone, every birthday, every moment Asher needs his father. But I won't force you into a relationship you don't want. Because I finally understand that love isn't about possession. It's about choice. And you deserve the right to choose." Tears welled in Lyra's eyes. "Do you mean that?" Every word. She reached out, took his hand. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I won't," Kyle said. "Which is why I'm only promising what I know I can deliver. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I'll try. Every single day, for the rest of my life. Whether you're beside me or not." Lyra's tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. That's all I ever wanted, she whispered. Just you, trying. Kael leaned forward, pressed his forehead against hers. Then that's what you'll get. They stayed like that for a long moment. Two wolves who'd broken each other and were now trying to figure out if broken things could be repaired or if you just had to build something new from the pieces. A knock on the door broke the silence. Drake entered, looking uncomfortable in the sterile hospital environment. Alpha, he said. We've got a problem. Of course they did. Because the universe wasn't done testing him yet. What kind of problem? Kael asked. The kind with an army, Drake said. Victor Steele just mobilized every wolf in his territory. They're heading toward the Crimson Moon border. And he's demanding to speak with you personally before he decides whether to declare war. Kael closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to find the strength to deal with one more crisis when all he wanted was to stay in this room with his family and pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. But that wasn't an option. That's what it meant to be Alpha. To stand between your pack and the darkness over and over until the day you couldn't stand anymore. How long do I have? Kael asked. He's giving you 12 hours, Drake said. After that, he crosses the border with hostile intent. Kael looked at Lyra. Go, she said quietly. Do what you need to do. I'll come back, he promised. I know, she said, and for the first time in 3 years, I actually believe you. Kael kissed Asher's forehead, kissed Lyra's hand, and walked out of that hospital room, knowing that the next 12 hours would determine not just the fate of his kingdom, but the fate of everything he'd fought so hard to protect. Victor Steele wanted to talk. Fine. They'd talk. And if talking failed, they'd fight. Either way, Kael was done running from the consequences of his choices. It was time to face them head-on and prove once and for all that an Alpha could be strong enough to protect his kingdom and soft enough to love his family, even if it killed him. Victor Steele's army looked like something out of a nightmare. 200 wolves, maybe more, spread across the ridge overlooking the Crimson Moon border. They weren't in formation, didn't need to be. This wasn't a military force. This was a horde, each wolf battle-scarred and feral-looking, the kind who'd survived in rogue territory by being meaner and tougher than everything trying to kill them. Kael stood on his side of the border with Marcus and 20 of his best warriors. The numbers weren't even close to fair, but fair had stopped mattering the moment Kael decided that protecting what he loved was worth more than protecting himself. Victor stood at the front of his force, arms crossed, that same expression of bored amusement he'd worn back in his territory. But there was something different in his eyes now, something harder, more personal. Alpha King, the rogue leader called out. Nice of you to show up. You gave me 12 hours, Kael replied. I'm here in 6. Let's talk. Victor gestured to a neutral space between the two forces. No weapons, just you and me. Marcus grabbed Kael's arm. This is a trap. Probably, Kael agreed, but we're going anyway. He stripped off his weapons. Knives, gun, even the small blade he kept in his boot, handed them all to Marcus and walked into no man's land wearing nothing but jeans and a shirt still stained with his mate's blood from the hospital. Victor met him there, equally unarmed, and for a moment they just stood facing each other while two armies waited to see if this would end in words or violence. You made quite a mess, Victor said finally. Not intentionally. Never is. Victor pulled out a cigarette, offered one to Kael. The Alpha King shook his head. Victor shrugged and lit his own. I heard about what happened with Garrett. Heard you took down your own Elder Council member for treason. That took guts. It took necessity, Kael corrected. He was going to use my mate and child as leverage. I couldn't let that stand. No, you couldn't. Victor took a long drag. But here's the thing. That little coup attempt, it didn't just affect your kingdom. Word spread. Every rogue pack from here to the coast heard that the great Alpha King Kael Draven had his mate kidnapped right out from under him, that his own council betrayed him, that for a few days there, your throne was up for grabs. And now they're wondering if the throne's still weak, Kael said. Exactly. Victor's smile was sharp. See, I've spent 20 years building a territory in the north. No laws, no pack structure, just strength and survival. And it's been good. But lately, some of my wolves have been asking why we're staying up in the frozen wasteland when there's perfectly good territory down here in the south. Territory that might not be as well defended as it used to be. So you're here to invade, Kael said. I'm here to find out if you're still the Alpha who crushed 3 challengers in 1 year, or if you're the broken wolf who let his mate run away. The distinction mattered. In the world these wolves inhabited, perception was reality. If Kyle looked weak, he was weak. And weak alphas didn't keep their territories for long. There was a philosophy buried in that brutal truth. Power wasn't just about what you could do, it was about what others believed you could do. Reputation, fear, respect, all of it built on the foundation of wolves looking at you and deciding whether to submit or fight. Kyle had spent 3 years cultivating that reputation, making himself into something untouchable. And then Lyra had left, and the whole carefully constructed image had cracked wide open to reveal the lonely, desperate male underneath. Now he had to decide who he was going to be, the image or the reality. The king who never showed weakness, or the male who'd learned that admitting you were broken was the first step toward actually healing. "I'm both," Kyle said finally. "I'm the alpha who crushed those challengers, and I'm the broken wolf who failed his mate. Both things are true. And if you want to test which one matters more, we can do this right now." Victor studied him through cigarette smoke. "You know I've got 200 wolves, and you've got 20. I know. You know you'll lose. Maybe." Kyle's voice was steady. "But you'll lose wolves too. Good wolves. Wolves who trust you to make smart decisions instead of throwing them into a meat grinder just to prove a point. And when it's over, when you've taken my territory and killed my warriors, you'll have to explain to your pack why 50 of them died for a kingdom you didn't even need." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Who says I don't need it?" "Because you're not stupid," Kyle said. "You've survived 20 years in rogue territory by being smart, not reckless. You know that taking Crimson Moon by force would unite every pack in 5 territories against you. They'd see you as a threat to the established order. Within a year, you'd be fighting wars on 3 fronts, and your northern territory would collapse while you were trying to hold the south. So what are you proposing?" "Alliance," Kyle said. "You want legitimacy. You want your wolves to have access to trade routes and medical care and all the benefits that come with being part of the pack structure instead of outside it. I can give you that. In exchange, you give me your support. You acknowledge me as Alpha King, and I acknowledge you as Lord of the Northern Territories. We establish trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and we both benefit." Victor laughed, but it wasn't mocking, just surprised. "You're offering me a seat at the table. I'm offering you what you actually want instead of making you fight for what you don't need." The rogue leader was quiet for a long moment. Then he dropped his cigarette, ground it out under his boot. "I came here expecting to either make you submit or tear your throat out," he said. "I didn't expect a negotiation. That's because most alphas are too proud to negotiate," Kyle said. "They see it as weakness. But I've learned something these past few weeks. Strength isn't about never bending. It's about knowing when bending prevents you from breaking." Victor studied him with new respect. "You really have changed." "Had to," Kyle said simply. "The alternative was losing everything that mattered." The rogue leader extended his hand. "All right, Alpha King, you've got yourself a deal. But I want it in writing. I want formal recognition from your council, and I want the trade routes open within 6 months." "Done," Kyle said and shook his hand. Behind them, 2 armies stood down. The tension that had been building toward violence dissipated like smoke, and Kyle felt something loosen in his chest, some knot he'd been carrying since the moment he'd read Lyra's letter. He'd chosen diplomacy over dominance, partnership over conquest, and it had worked, not because he was weak, but because he was finally strong enough to choose a different kind of strength. Victor turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing," he said. "Your mate, the one who ran. You get her back?" "Not yet," Kale admitted. "Maybe not ever. That's her choice to make." Victor nodded slowly. "Then you'd better earn it, because a female like that, strong enough to walk away from an Alpha King, is worth more than any throne." "I know," Kale said. And with that, Victor Steele and his 200 wolves turned and marched back north, leaving Kale standing on the border between his kingdom and the wilderness his mate had fled into. Marcus approached, his expression unreadable. "You just made an alliance with the most dangerous rogue pack in the territories." "I did," Kale agreed, "and it was the right call. The council is going to lose their minds. Let them." Kale turned to face his beta. "I'm done making decisions based on what the council wants. From now on, I make decisions based on what's right. And if the council can't handle that, they can find themselves a new king." Marcus's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "You really have changed." "Yeah," Kale said quietly. "I really have." They walked back to the vehicles in silence. Kael's mind was already racing ahead, cataloging everything that needed to be done. Return to the kingdom. Address the council. Formalize the alliance with Victor. Deal with the fallout from Garrett's treason. Rebuild the systems that had allowed corruption to fester for so long. And through all of it, prove to Lyra that he meant what he said. That he'd changed not just for her, but because of her. That the male she'd loved was still in there somewhere, buried under years of cold ambition, finally clawing his way back to the surface. It was going to take time. Months, maybe years. But Kael had learned patience in a way he'd never understood before. He'd learned that some things couldn't be forced or commanded into existence. They had to be earned through consistent action over time. And he had time. All the time in the world, as long as he didn't waste it. 3 months later, Kael stood in the rebuilt council chambers and looked at the faces of the wolves who'd served as his advisors for 3 years. Half of them were new. The ones who'd been complicit in Garrett's conspiracy had been removed, some exiled, some imprisoned. The replacements were younger, hungrier, less attached to the old ways of doing things. Marcus sat at Kael's right hand, officially named First Beta, with full authority to act in the Alpha's absence. To his left sat an empty chair, Lyra's chair, the Luna's seat. It had remained empty for 3 months, and Kael had refused to fill it or remove it. Some of the council had pushed him to declare the position vacant, to find a new mate who would actually fulfill the duties of Luna. But Kael had shut that down immediately. There was one Luna of Crimson Moon. Her name was Lyra. And the seat would stay empty until she chose to fill it or told him definitively she never would. Today's session was routine. Trade agreements with the Silver Fang Pack, border security reports, a dispute between 2 minor packs that needed mediation, the kind of administrative work that used to bore Kael to tears. But he'd learned to see it differently now. Each decision affected real wolves with real lives. The trade agreements meant families could eat. The border security meant pups could sleep safely. The mediation meant 2 packs could avoid a war that would cost lives on both sides. It wasn't glamorous. But it mattered. After 3 hours, they broke for lunch. Kael stepped out onto the balcony, needing air, needing space to breathe. Marcus joined him a moment later. "You've got a visitor." "Who?" "See for yourself." Kael turned, and his heart stopped. Lyra stood in the doorway, holding Asher against her chest. She looked different, healthier. The dark circles under her eyes were gone. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a braid that hung over one shoulder. She looked like herself again, the woman he'd fallen for 4 years ago, strong and beautiful and absolutely terrifying in her self-possession. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," Kael managed. His throat felt tight. "What are you doing here? I came to see how you're doing." She moved onto the balcony, and Kael caught Asher's scent, milk and innocence and something uniquely his son. The baby had grown. His eyes were open now, bright and curious, tracking movement with that intense focus pups had. "I'm good," Kael said. "Busy, trying to fix everything I broke. I heard about the alliance with Victor. That was smart. It was necessary. Still smart." Lyra shifted Asher to her other arm. "I also heard you've been making changes to the pack laws. Limiting the council's power. Establishing protections for mates who want to leave abusive situations. Creating resources for wolves struggling with the pressures of pack life." "I have," Kael confirmed. "Turns out there were a lot of wolves suffering in silence because they didn't think anyone would listen. I'm trying to change that. It's good work," Lyra said. "Important work." "Thanks." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. 3 months ago, Kael would have tried to fill that silence with words, with explanations, with promises designed to bridge the gap between them. But he'd learned that sometimes silence was its own form of communication. Sometimes you just had to stand in the discomfort and let the other person come to you in their own time. Finally, Lyra spoke. "I've been watching you. From a distance. I have wolves who keep me updated on what's happening in the kingdom. And Kael, you've kept every promise you made. You've shown up. You've changed. You've proven that the male I saw in that compound wasn't just a crisis response. It's who you actually are now." "I'm trying," Kael said. "Every day. That's all I can do." "I know." Lyra looked down at Asher. "And he deserves to know his father, the real one, not the stories I tell him. So I'm here to ask if you want to be involved in his life." "Yes," Kael said immediately. "More than anything." "It won't be easy," Lyra warned. I'm still not ready to come back to the palace. I'm still not sure if I ever will be. So if you want to be part of his life, you'll have to come to us. You'll have to make time in your schedule. You'll have to prioritize him over council meetings and political obligations." "I will," Kyle said. "I'll make it work." Lyra searched his face, then she nodded. "Okay, we'll start slow, a few hours a week, see how it goes." "Thank you," Kale said, and the words felt inadequate. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Don't thank me yet," Lyra said. "You still have to prove yourself." "But Kyle, I want you to prove yourself. I want this to work. Because despite everything, despite all the hurt and all the years of feeling invisible, I never stopped loving you. I just stopped believing you could love me back." The admission hung in the air between them. Kale wanted to tell her he loved her too, wanted to promise her forever and swear he'd never hurt her again. But words were cheap. He'd learned that the hard way. So instead he said, "Can I hold him?" Lyra hesitated. Then she handed Asher over. The baby settled against Kyle's chest, his tiny hand grabbing onto his father's shirt. He made a small sound, not quite a cry, just acknowledgement that something had changed. Kyle looked down at his son and felt that crushing weight of responsibility again. But this time it didn't feel crushing. It felt clarifying, like everything he'd done up to this point had been practice for this moment, for understanding what actually mattered. "Hey, buddy," he said quietly. "I'm your dad, and I know I haven't been around much, but that's going to change. I'm going to show up for you. Every milestone, every moment you need me. I'm going to be the father you deserve." Asher stared up at him with solemn eyes, as if weighing whether to believe this stranger making promises. Then the baby yawned, closed his eyes, and fell asleep against Kyle's chest with the kind of trust only children could give. And Kyle understood what Lyra had been trying to tell him for 3 years, that this was what love looked like. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts or political advantages, just showing up, being present, making someone feel safe enough to be vulnerable with you. He'd spent 3 years trying to build an empire while the only thing that mattered was right in front of him. But empires could be rebuilt. Kingdoms could be reformed. And maybe, if he worked hard enough and stayed consistent enough and proved through actions instead of words that he'd truly changed, he could rebuild this too. Not the marriage they'd had before. That was dead, burned to ash by neglect and loneliness and all the ways they'd failed each other. But maybe something new. Something built on honesty instead of obligation. On partnership instead of possession. On the understanding that love wasn't about owning someone, but about choosing them, over and over, every single day. It wouldn't be easy, would probably take years, might never fully heal. But it was worth trying, because this, holding his son while his mate watched with cautious hope in her eyes, this was worth everything he'd lost and everything he'd learned in the losing. 6 months after that, Kyle stood in front of the entire kingdom and did something no Alpha King had done in 3 generations. He apologized. The speech was broadcast to every pack in the territories. Kyle stood alone on the palace steps, no notes, no prepared remarks, just him and a microphone and the truth he'd been running from for too long. "I've spent the last year learning what it means to fail," he said. "Not as an alpha, not as a king, but as a male, as a mate, as a father. And I've learned that the strength I thought I had, the power I built my entire identity around, was hollow. Because real strength isn't about dominance, it's about vulnerability. It's about admitting when you're wrong and doing the work to fix it." He could see the shock on the faces of the wolves gathered below. Alphas didn't admit weakness. Alphas didn't apologize. But Kyle wasn't most alphas anymore. "I neglected my mate," he continued. "I chose power over partnership. I convinced myself that building a strong kingdom was the same thing as being a strong leader. And I was wrong. Because a kingdom is only as strong as the wolves who live in it. And if those wolves are suffering in silence because they're afraid to show weakness, then the kingdom is built on sand." He paused, let the words sink in. "So I'm making changes. Real changes. We're establishing support systems for wolves struggling with mental health. We're creating protections for mates in abusive situations. We're limiting the council's power and increasing transparency in government. We're acknowledging that pack life shouldn't mean sacrificing your individuality or your happiness." Some of the older wolves were shaking their heads. This wasn't how things were done. This was weakness masquerading as progress. But the younger wolves were listening, really listening, and Kyle could see recognition in their eyes. The understanding that someone in power was finally acknowledging what they'd all known but been afraid to say. That the old ways weren't working. That tradition without compassion was just cruelty with a prettier name. That an alpha who couldn't admit his failures was just a tyrant waiting to happen. "I don't know if I'll be a good king," Kael said. "I don't know if I can undo all the damage I've caused, but I'm going to try. And I'm asking you to hold me accountable, to call me out when I fall back into old patterns, to remind me that leadership isn't about being infallible. It's about being willing to learn." He stepped back from the microphone. The silence was deafening. Then someone started clapping, a young wolf near the back, then another, then more. Not everyone. Some wolves turned and walked away, disgusted by this display of weakness. But enough stayed, enough clapped, enough looked at their alpha king with something that might have been hope. And Kyle understood that this was what real power looked like. Not fear, not domination, but the willingness to be seen in all your imperfection and trust that your pack would support you anyway. He'd spent 3 years trying to be invincible. Now he was trying to be human, and somehow that was harder and more important than anything he'd done before. What? 1 year after Lyra left, Kyle sat on the floor of a small cabin in the woods and watched his son take his first steps. Asher had been practicing for weeks, pulling himself up on furniture, wobbling on unsteady legs, falling on his diapered bottom with a surprised expression that never failed to make Kyle laugh. But today was different. Today, Asher stood up, looked at his father, and walked. 3 steps. Wobbly and uncertain, but determined. Then 4. Then 5. Then he collapsed into Kyle's arms with a triumphant squeal. Kyle caught him, lifted him up, spun him around while Asher laughed with pure joy. "Did you see that?" Lyra asked from the kitchen. She'd been making lunch but had clearly been watching. "I saw it," Kyle said. "He's a natural." "He gets that from me," Lyra said. "Nurturous," said, and there was warmth in her voice. "You're too careful. He needed someone reckless in his genetics." "Hey, I can be reckless." "Kyle, you plan your recklessness. That defeats the purpose." They'd been doing this for a year now. These small moments of domesticity in the cabin Lyra had bought with money from her own family. Kale would drive out twice a week, sometimes more, to spend time with Asher, to change diapers and read stories and teach his son about the world he'd one day inherit. And slowly, carefully, he and Lyra had been rebuilding something that looked almost like friendship. They didn't sleep in the same bed, didn't kiss, didn't do any of the things married couples did. But they talked, really talked, about everything Kyle had missed while buried in his work, about Lyra's research project, which she'd resumed and was now writing a book about pack migration patterns, about Asher's personality, already showing signs of the stubborn determination he'd inherited from both parents, about the future and what it might hold if they could both let go of the past. Lunch was simple, sandwiches and fruit. They ate at the small table while Asher demolished a bowl of cut-up banana. "How's the council?" Lyra asked. "Mostly functional," Kyle said. "Elder Garrett's replacement is young but sharp. She challenges me, which is good, keeps me honest." "And the alliance with Victor?" "Holding. We've got trade routes established. His wolves are integrating slowly. There have been some conflicts, but nothing we can't handle." Lyra nodded. "You sound different when you talk about it now. Less stressed." "I am less stressed," Kale admitted. "I've learned to delegate. Marcus handles a lot of the day-to-day operations. I focus on the big picture and try not to micromanage. Who are you, and what have you done with my control freak mate?" Kale smiled. "He died about a year ago. I'm what grew back." Lyra's expression softened. "I'm proud of you. For what it's worth, you've done real work, not just on the kingdom, on yourself." "Thank you," Kyle said quietly. They finished lunch in comfortable silence. Kale cleaned up while Lyra put Asher down for his nap. When she came back, she looked nervous. "What's wrong?" Kale asked. "Nothing's wrong. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Okay." Lyra sat down, folded her hands on the table. "I've been thinking about us. About what we are and what we could be." Kale's heart rate kicked up, but he stayed quiet, letting her talk. "This past year has been good," Lyra continued. "Really good. You've shown up. You've been consistent. You've proven that you meant what you said. And I think I'm ready to try again, not to go back to what we were, but to build something new." What does that look like? Kael asked carefully. I don't know yet, Lyra admitted. Maybe we start by dating. Actually dating, like we did before we got married. Getting to know each other again. Figuring out who we are now instead of who we were. I'd like that, Kael said. And maybe eventually, if it works, we talk about me coming back. Not to be Luna, not to play a role, but to be your partner, your equal, the person you actually choose instead of the person you're obligated to. You were never an obligation, Kael said. Lyra's smile was sad. I was. For a long time. But I don't want to be anymore. I want to be your choice, and I want you to be mine. Not because we're bound by mate bonds or pack law, but because we actually want each other. Kael reached across the table, took her hand. I do want you. I've always wanted you. I just didn't know how to show it in a way that mattered. Then show me now, Lyra said. Show me every day, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Deal, Kael said. They sat there holding hands across the table, and Kael felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to fix an unfixable situation, but the quiet hope of someone who'd done the work, made the changes, and was finally seeing the possibility of something better on the horizon. It wouldn't be perfect. They'd still fight, still have days where the old wounds reopened and they had to navigate through pain to find each other again. But that was okay, because perfection was a lie sold by wolves who'd never had to rebuild something from ruins. Real love was messy, complicated, required constant effort and communication and the willingness to choose each other even when it would be easier to walk away. And Kael was finally ready for real love. Not the fantasy version, the actual work of it. Outside the cabin window, snow was starting to fall. The first of the season. It covered the ground in a blanket of white, transforming the landscape into something new. Kael watched it fall and thought about transformations. About how sometimes you had to let the old version of yourself die before something better could grow. About how the hardest lessons were the ones that broke you open and forced you to rebuild from the inside out. He'd been broken, thoroughly and completely. But in the breaking, he'd found something he'd been missing his entire life. Himself. The real version. Not the Alpha King, not the cold strategist, just Kael. A male who loved his mate and his son and was willing to do whatever it took to protect them. Even if that meant admitting he'd been wrong. Even if that meant changing everything about how he'd lived his life. Especially that. Because in the end, the throne didn't matter. The kingdom didn't matter. Power and legacy, and all the things he'd sacrificed for didn't matter. Only this mattered. This cabin, this woman, this child, this choice to keep showing up every single day and prove through actions instead of words that he'd become the male worthy of the family he'd almost lost. Asher woke from his nap crying. Lyra started to get up, but Kael waved her off. I've got him, he said. He went to the nursery, picked up his son, held him close while the baby settled against his chest. Asher's crying turned to hiccups, then to silence, then to the soft breathing of a child who felt safe enough to be vulnerable. And Kael stood there, in the fading afternoon light, holding his son, and made a promise. Not to be perfect, not to never fail, but to keep trying, to keep showing up, to keep choosing love over power, partnership over possession, presence over prestige, to be better tomorrow than he was today, and the day after that to be better still. It was the only promise that mattered, the only one worth keeping. And as the snow fell outside and his son breathed against his chest and his mate hummed softly in the kitchen, Alpha King Kael Draven finally understood what it meant to be truly powerful. Not through domination, but through love.